Welcome to the Josh Hall Web Design Show. Helping you build better websites and create a web design business that gives you freedom and a lifestyle you love.
And welcome in, friends, to episode 162 of the podcast. Really excited to be with you on this episode and to chat about a couple subjects that I'm guessing when I say these words probably bring mixed emotions to you. So how do these make you feel? Google algorithm updates, SEO strategy. If you just kind of quivered in your seat or wherever you are right now, whether you're mowing or doing the dishes or driving, if those words made you feel a little uncomfortable, this episode is going to help you feel much more confident with Google algorithm updates, if I could say that today, and SEO in general. Because my guest in this episode, Julian Goldie, is an SEO guy. I definitely consider him an expert in the SEO realm. And what's been really reassuring for me as someone who just was terrified of SEO and learned it much later on in my career than I should have as a web designer, I've been very reassured with the fact that SEO, while yes, it can get complicated, the basics and the fundamentals are quite simple. And it's very common sense. And you're going to hear, particularly from Julian in this episode, about if you just know the basics and if you just follow what's labeled as white hat techniques, meaning non-shady SEO techniques, you will get ahead and you can get great results for yourself and for your clients with SEO. And in this episode in particular, Julian and I dive into, it's fairly well-rounded about SEO and strategy in general, but also in particular, the Google algorithm updates and how those can affect your SEO strategy. So I was really excited to have Julian on. He was a really great guest, very knowledgeable. I actually highly recommend checking out his website out at juliangoldie.com. And he does have a free link building book that I would highly recommend picking up. You can get that when you go to his website at juliangoldie.com. Check that out. And I'm really excited to hear how his thoughts and his experience and expertise in the SEO realm will help you, again, with not only your site, but with your clients. That way you can stay on top of what these algorithm updates mean and whether you should change your SEO strategy or add to it. This is going to be beneficial for you, even if you're just, covering the basics for your clients for SEO, or if you are actually doing recurring revenue SEO plans, which is, as you'll find out, very achievable, and you don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure out SEO. And in fact, let me just say a quick plug before we dive in here. I built the brand of joshhall.co through organic SEO completely without any expertise in it. I essentially built all of my tutorials and all my blog posts and everything without doing any keyword research, any fancy SEO. I just created what I thought was good content that answered questions. You're going to hear about how to do that and build confidence with your SEO game in this episode. Now, if you are ready to go to the next level with SEO, and after this episode, you're like, okay, I want to get a better understanding of it, I do have my SEO course that's open and available to you right now. You can actually just go to joshhall.co/SEO. You can check that out. It will be your complete guide to understanding SEO from the fundamental level. And we even go into a little more advanced tactics with SEO. And in that course, I'll even show you how you can make money off it either one time or by adding some recurring revenue resources to your business as well. So check that out if you're ready to go to the next level after this episode. I do want to say too, we do cover quite a few tools in this one. So all the links to all the tools and resources mentioned are at this episode number, joshhall.co/162. Make sure to check that out. And without further ado, here is Julian. Let's talk Google algorithm updates and SEO strategies. Julian, welcome to the podcast, dude. Awesome to have you on, man.
Thanks very much for having me. Yeah, should be good.
And a special thank you because I was going to ask you shortly where you're based out of. I think it's about 10 p.m. your time right now, so it's late for you. Let's start off with there. Where are you based out of? And if you could just give us a snapshot of what you do, that'd be a great way to kick off this conversation, I think.
Yeah, sure. So I'm based out in Bangkok, Thailand. So yeah, it's past my bedtime right now. Just kidding. But so I help websites rank higher on Google with link building so they can get more leads, traffic, and sales.
Well said. Very concise. And it is funny, man, with with the way the world is now in technology, and especially our world of graphic designers, web designers, SEO, digital agencies, I think we're used to just doing calls at all times of the day. It's hard for me right now. I have a family with 2 little girls, so I rarely do evening calls. So first of all, thank you for jumping on and doing it late on your schedule. But we'll definitely we'll try to end your day successfully here, man, because we're going to talk about SEO. And as I mentioned before we went live, my audience are primarily web design freelancers and agency owners, and SEO is a big part to web design and what we're doing. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. I am no SEO expert, although I did build my brand here with joshhall.co and my website 100% with SEO. So I learned, I actually know a lot more than I thought I did, but it was more just common sense, best practices that I am, employed years ago that really helped me for this. So all that to say, really excited to pick your brain about SEO as an expert. And particularly, we're going to talk about algorithm changes and how that affects SEO. So I think a great place to start, man, would be to just take us down to the simplistic definition of what is an algorithm change. We can take it to elementary status here for folks who are brand new into web design. What is an algorithm change and how does that affect SEO?
All right. So when it comes to Google, there's all these different ranking factors that determine how a website appears at number 1 or why it doesn't appear at number 1, and what appears on the first page of Google versus what doesn't rank at all on Google. And Google, essentially, they release updates increasingly commonly, and they basically change the way that they rank websites. So this may be to improve usability, to improve the quality of results that appear on Google. It may be because certain, black hat and dodgy practices were being used to rank higher on Google, like quite a lot of updates previously. And it's just about a change in the algorithm that affects how everyone's website ranks. And this can be pretty drastic sometimes. So sometimes an algorithm change happens and overnight a website loses all its traffic for something that it's been doing and that it's now being penalized for. And that's another thing with Google algorithm updates. There are all these penalties that come along sometimes with them. So when a website is algorithmically penalized by Google, it means that this website has been punished for something that it's doing. And that may be because of an algorithm update.
And what are some of the most recent updates that have changed with algorithms? I have some follow-up questions to that, but I'd love to know what you've seen, because again, this is a little bit outside of my realm of expertise. Like what are some of the recent algorithm updates that have happened? And I think this episode will probably come out either late 2021 or early 22. So let's just keep it with like 2021. What were some of the ones that happened in 2021?
Well, so for example, one of the biggest updates this year was in June and July. They released 2 core updates. And what a core update is it's looking at not one factor in particular. So it's not looking at like, okay, what links are you building or what content do you have on your website? It's like a whole snapshot of all the content on your website, the way that it's built, the speed, the links that you get into your site, literally dozens of ranking factors, and then it's grading you on that. And the problem is that your whole site can take a hit because a core update has come out. So it's kind of like a holistic snapshot of your website. And if your website isn't up to par, then you can take a big hit. Another one that came out this year is for affiliate marketers. So there was a review Google update, and this basically hit lots of, those websites where they're targeting like Amazon products, and they'll link out to Amazon products, and you click on it and they get a commission on it. So a lot of these sites provided like zero value. They were just rewriting reviews off Amazon product reviews, and literally like just rewriting the testimonials or the reviews from there, and not really providing anything outside of Amazon. In fact, you may have found it yourself where like you Google a product that's on Amazon And it's literally like that website hasn't even tested out the product.
Sure.
So what Google came along with the update and did was they said, right, we're going to algorithmically update the way that we rank websites that are focused purely on reviews and purely on, linking out to Amazon products.
Well, so it's funny with that type of update, there's kind of two sides to this. Part of me is, as the web designer, it's like, man, what a pain. I've got to work on site speed and optimization and links and internal linking, all the other things. But the other part of me is very thankful for these type of algorithm updates, because I know there's a reason. They're not just willy-nilly just doing it for no reason. I know there's a reason. And I don't know if I've said this on the podcast yet, but one of my courses actually got ripped off last year. So this excites me in that regard, because with this course, and I was paying a service $300 a month just to continually take down this course that was popping up on sites. And it wasn't the full course. It was like screenshots of the course, but people were still finding it. And the problem is on Google. I'm not going to say which course it is just to avoid that publicly here. But the problem is it started affecting SEO. Like, I started just Googling my brand and I would see this course pop up. So it does in that regard, it excites me that these algorithm updates, I'm sure, are to try to stop those sites. Is that fair to say? Like, from your perspective, do you think that's a reason they're trying to do those type of updates in particular?
Yeah. I mean, I did in a perfect world, Google would be like the most organized digital library in the world. And when they release an update, what they want is to improve the quality of the results that come up, right? So if you Googled like 15 years, for example, all sorts, and if you just typed in like, I don't know, best course for affiliate marketing, all sorts of spam would pop up, because people could really easily manipulate rankings. It didn't matter what your content was like. It didn't really matter if you had a good quality website. It was just about doing all these black hat things to manipulate Google's algorithm. Whereas if you skip ahead now to 2021, then you can see that the quality of results are drastically better than they were before. And from Google's perspective, they're doing that because they want to still dominate as the number one search engine. And, the better their results are and the smarter Google's algorithm is, then the more likely people are to keep using their service and stay on the website.
That's a good point. There's definitely a benefit there for Google to not pull up the junk and all the janky type spammy sites that people go to. And then you get mad. It's like, crap, what did I freaking click on? And in the case of a course creator like myself, or anyone who has a product that could be illegally distributed, which, by the way, I thought I was alone in this. It turns out basically everyone that has an online course, it gets ripped at some point, especially if there's any sort of notoriety with it. So it kind of made me feel better. I wasn't alone, but then I realized that, wow, it's the internet. Of course, there's going to be a dark side to it and a lot of spammy and shady things, but it's always magnified when it comes to SEO, because there were all these old techniques that you could manipulate search engines. I actually think it might be a good time to bring up what black hat means, especially for people who are new to SEO. Can you kind of explain what some of those black hat type of techniques were, and why Google started to really combat those?
Yeah, sure. So black hat is basically, you have like two different ways to do SEO, right? You have the white hat and the black hat. And black hat is anything that's dodgy or spammy or anything that's just a black hat SEO technique is just designed to manipulate Google's algorithm. It's not designed to actually create a good quality website that people actually enjoy using. Whereas white hat is where you're focusing on, all the things you should be doing as a business. I mean, I know you were talking before about like you only had a basic understanding of SEO, but really that's SEO is very basic in principles. It's just about creating a great website that people love and engage and keep coming back to.
I love hearing you say that. It's you know what's so funny, man? Every time I have somebody who is really versed in either expert status or at least knows a lot about SEO, always says that. They go back to just the basics and how simple it really can be. And for me, I definitely found that it was just good content, good linking, good content that humans want to read. And I've learned some keyword optimization tips and things like that. But at the end of the day, good content seems to trump everything. And when you were saying the black hat techniques, would that be things like keyword stuffing and kind of like, I hate to say ridiculous content, but there's definitely content that's geared towards just robots and search engine to where they put in the search term everywhere they can. And I know keyword stuffing, I think probably worked like 20 years ago, but it's a whole different ballgame now. What are some of the other like black hat, dodgy kind of practices that people are doing specifically?
It's also, it's still like the Wild West out there, like you were saying, with your course being ripped off sometimes. But for example, like people would stuff their website with keywords, right? So a part of Google's algorithm is keyword density, which means how many times is a keyword mentioned on a page. So let's say you have a blog about SEO, and if you obviously need to include SEO on that page, you don't want to mention it too many times because then it looks spammy. You don't want to mention it too little times because then Google doesn't know what your content is about. So you have to get that balance. Now, going back a few years ago, Google wouldn't realize the difference between that, and it would just say, right, this website has mentioned SEO 100 times on the page, so it must be super relevant, and let's just rank it number one for that. Also other stuff as well, like people would try and hide the amount of times they've put a keyword on the page. So they would make it white text on a white background, which meant that when people land on the page, they can't see it. But when Google's crawler goes through the page, it sees, right, that SEO is mentioned 20, 30 times. The keyword is mentioned over and over again, so it must be relevant content.
Gotcha. I did that years ago. I thought I was so clever because I was like, what if in the footer that's black, I would just put a bunch of keywords in there that's black so you wouldn't see it unless a savvy person highlighted it. I thought I was all clever. I did not realize that I was 100% keyword stuffing. And that was definitely a black hat. I didn't intentionally try to be spammy or shady, but there I was. And that's one thing too. I feel like sometimes it's unintentional. It's not like if you do something bad on SEO, you meant to do that or you're a terrible person. I mean, some people are questionable with their tactics, but in that case, I was just an innocent person who didn't know enough about it and thought I was being smart. So I think there's probably a mix of that too there, right?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, some people, if you don't have an awareness of SEO, then it's quite easy to fall into these traps of doing things that you think, oh, I should mention that keyword over and over again, or I should build all these links to this page and that'll help me rank. But actually, it's very easy if you don't know what you're doing to do some stuff that goes against Google's webmaster guidelines. Yeah, and that's another thing when it comes to Black Hat SEO, Google have a list of guidelines that they say, right, this is what you should be doing, this is what you shouldn't be doing.
What is the best resource for that in particular, Julian, that the webmaster guidelines?
So I think if you go into Google and you type in Google webmaster guidelines, it should pop up. They definitely have like a link
developers.
I
see developers.google.com/ webmaster guidelines. I'll make sure this is linked in the show too, because this is a great resource. I think I looked at this, a while back. To be honest, I kind of forgot where it was exactly, because I think I probably looked at it, got a good idea, and then moved on from there. But this is a really good thing to keep handy. And I'm assuming they keep this updated too, right? With all the recent updates.
They also have other pages on like Google updates and what the latest updates are. I mean, this year has been crazy for Google updates. I mean, ever since I've been working in SEO, there's always been big Google updates. This year it's been like almost every week that they've released a new update, and some of them have been absolutely massive. So
are the updates for algorithms kind of like WordPress theme and plugin updates, where there's like major updates, which would be like a 3.0 to a 4.0, and then I always call them like minor updates, where it's just something little that it still is in like the 3.0 version. Is that kind of how Google works as well?
Yeah. So for example, like they might release an update that's purely like user interface, or they might like add a few more ads to some particular searches, and like you have the organic listings and you have the ads at the top. Mm-hmm. So like they might add more real estate for the ads and reduce the amount of organic listings, or they might add like more carousels, on the page, like the image gallery, the video gallery, that sort of thing. Yeah. So some of them are tiny, and then some of them, like the core updates, if you get hit by that, then it might be 6 months or it might be 9 months before the next Google core update, which is when you're going to see improvements in your website again. So
how do you keep track of? Yeah, how do you keep track of those personally? Do you just keep tabs of this resource for the Google guideline or the SEO guidelines and stuff? Or is there like a good news source that you keep your eye on that will have a heads up on some of these updates? And a follow-up question to that, does Google announce, like give a heads up about the algorithm updates, or they just kind of do it and let you know what they did?
Sometimes they will announce it, like especially on Twitter. They have like an account on Twitter, and they'll announce like, right, we've got a new update coming. Other times it's not even confirmed, but other people will see big shifts in the rankings, and they'll say, and then a few weeks later, Google will announce, right, there was an update last month, we're still rolling it out. It is, like I say, I mean, it's difficult to keep track on every single update. Honestly, I wouldn't say I know about every single update this year, because there's just been so many. But at the same time, it all comes down to the core principles again. So are you doing the right things with your website? Are you creating good content, building good links, or are you following principles? The other way that's really useful for keeping up to date with Google updates is just Facebook groups. If you're in like the Authority Hacker group, for example, and all sorts of other SEO groups on Facebook. And when you're in a community of SEOs like that, as soon as there's a Google update, you'll hear about it, because someone's website has been hit, or someone's website's traffic has benefited from an update.
Great call. Yeah. And I'll link that too in the show notes. I'm keeping tabs of some of the links we're hitting, because some of these are great for sure. And I want to go back to some of the algorithm update stuff, but I meant to ask you, where the heck did the name Blackhat and Whitehat come from? Do you know where those terms came from?
Honestly, I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, I should know that. I should find that out.
I was just curious as well. I think maybe because my wife and I are currently watching Downton Abbey, and so I just imagine like a black hat and like a dinner tux or something, or versus a white hat. Like I wonder if there was some sort of fancy lingo that was pulled from years ago. But yeah, I was just curious. I didn't know if you knew where those terms came from. I
don't know if you've like seen it in, like I've noticed it in all sorts of areas of online business. Like there's a black hat way to sell books on Amazon. There's a black hat way to do affiliate marketing. Like,
so it's not just
be like this divide. Yeah, every single corner of the internet, especially in online business, there's people who will try and do all sorts of dodgy things, and there's people who are very clear with their principles and their ethics.
Gotcha. So it may not be just SEO related, that term. Maybe it's more generalized. Like there could be a black hat way to do a podcast interview versus a white hat way. Maybe that's more of a generalized term. See, now I'm going to take us off on the rabbit hole of figuring out where that term came from. So I just got something to add to my to-do list this week, because now I got to figure that out.
I'm putting it on the list as well. I'm going to join you this weekend doing that.
I'm curious. I'm sure a bunch of listeners are too. We're all going to waste a bunch of time figuring out what the heck that means.
Not the most productive way to spend an afternoon, but
but hey, if we're ever on Jeopardy or something one day, we'll know what that means. So there we go.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. You never know.
Right. So great resources so far, man. I think one thing that's making me feel better about this is you constantly go back to the idea of just good content and those good best practices. Maybe we can shift this to some of those best practices. Now, we've talked a lot about SEO on the podcast in previous episodes, but if you could give just a snapshot of some of the best practices for SEO that algorithms shouldn't mess with, what might those be?
Sure. So first of all, I think you'd start with, if you were creating a website and you were building it out, first thing you'd want to think about is keywords, right? So reverse engineering, how are people going to find my content? What are people going to search on Google to find my website? And, you can use all sorts of tools for this. You could just look at the auto-complete results on Google, when you type in something and it pops down with like 10 different questions or 10 different searches. And just figuring out, right, what are people searching in my industry? So for example, if you have an affiliate marketing course, you might look at, right, people are trying to figure out how to do affiliate marketing online, how to get started, affiliate marketing for beginners, and just build out a bunch of keywords from there. Now, when it comes to creating the content, and you want to create a blog for every single one of those keywords. So one blog focuses on one keyword. Now, when you're creating that piece of content, you want to look at what are your competitors doing right now and what's ranking number one on Google already. Because you want to figure out, like, who's successful with this, why are they successful, and what can I do to make my piece of content even better so I can outrank them? So for example, if you were trying to rank for the keyword affiliate marketing course, go into Google, type it in, and then look at the top 3 to 5 results and just check, right, how have they structured the article? What topics have they covered? What type of article is it? Because there's different formats. Like it could be a review article, it could be a top 10 article, it could be a listicle. And then also look at how long the content is and have they included images, videos, that sort of thing. That will give you a basic idea. From there, it's really important to promote your content. So with Google, they look at something called backlinks, which are basically just a clickable text from one website to another. So you click the word click here and it takes you to another blog or another website out there. Now, when it comes to links, this is how, right, basically Google's algorithm works like a voting system. So when it sees you have links from other websites, these are like votes to say that your content is good. And if you get those votes from high quality websites that are relevant or authoritative, then that's like a plus vote for you. And you'll find quite often the top ranking websites on Google are also the ones with the most links. Mm. So when you've found the keywords that you want to rank for, you've created an awesome piece of content. Now it's time to go out there and promote it. And you could do that by you could feature on podcasts and potentially they'll link to you at the end of the podcast.
So I was going to say that's exactly what we're doing here. You're getting this conversation we're having is a prime example of a white hat technique because you came on my show. You're giving some awesome nuggets of advice and tips and expertise, and we're going to link it in my podcast page, which will link back to your website. So we'll link your website, juliangoldie.com, on the podcast page, and then we'll have a transcription and everything. So perfect example of a white hat technique. We're not doing anything shady, spammy. We're just talking and hopefully helping some people out. And boom, this is a good example of a white hat technique. I didn't really think about that, but.
Well, that's it. Yeah. So, everyone who's listening, they've already got the link building strategy sorted. Just feature on some podcasts, get some links in there. PR is a great way to get backlinks because it's just, you go out there, you get featured, people get to know you, but also you get a link at the end of it. So whether it's podcasts, reviews, whatever.
Yeah, and I never quite heard it phrased like that with the positive votes. I really like that because it makes a lot of sense. It's like I trust to send traffic to this site. And I'm really cognizant of that too. It's one thing with the show that I've realized is when proposals come in and when I do get a chance to look at some guests who I don't know personally yet, I do check out the site to make sure it isn't something spammy or shady or that I'm not going to feel comfortable linking to. And you talked about relevancy too. That's a big one as well. Like, I guess a black hat technique that was used years ago, maybe it still is, was just to get links at every possible site you could, but that's actually not good, right? Because from my understanding is you want to get your website linked if you have an SEO strategy on sites that are relevant. Because if I have a link to my website on a barbershop website, I'm not talking about like site designed by, but as joshhall.co, a barbershop doesn't need to be linking to my site because it's not relevant at all.
Yeah,
like
it's not
my
relevant.
service doesn't have anything to do with that.
Yeah, that's it. So not all backlinks are equal and some are worth more than others. So typically the more relevant a link is, or the more authoritative the link is, then the more that backlink is worth. So for example, if you have a website about affiliate marketing and you get a backlink from a barber in Bangkok, it doesn't really make much sense. And then also when Google crawls that website, it's like, why is this site linking out to that one? It doesn't make sense. And also, is it doing that to manipulate rankings? Is it doing that just for SEO purposes? Google doesn't like SEOs, so like, because our job is to try and play with their algorithm and to try, to figure out ways to rank websites higher.
So even just by that practical example you just walked us through, Google, if you confuse Google, it could think that you are being malicious in some way on purpose, right? And like I said, maybe in my case, I didn't think about the keyword stuffing being a problem. I just thought I was being clever. Actually, it was potentially, well, in that case, it was a little different than an unrelated link, but I could see how if you accidentally confuse Google, that could damage your site. Or going back to the algorithm stuff, it could definitely cause some harm to your rankings if you're just accidentally confusing Google, because Google is at the end of the day just a matchmaker. It's just looking for an answer for a question or something, the right result, the right SERP to pull up for some sort of search.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one mistake a lot of webmasters make is that when they find out link building helps improve their rankings, they go into a website like Fiverr.com. They see they can buy backlinks for like $20 for 1,000 links, and then they blast them all to their site. And the problem is that those links, that service is being used by all sorts of websites out there. And like, some of the dodgiest ones out there, like it might be casinos, or it might be Viagra websites, something like that. Right. So like, if you're using the same service and you're building those links that everyone else is using, then it looks really dodgy to Google, and Google can easily sort of like figure out, right, these sites are using it and we've penalized them. This site is using it as well, so we'll probably penalize them too. I mean, I'm sure, not in those words. I'm sure it hasn't got an English accent, but.
Well, and that makes sense as to why, like when a website gets hacked, there always seems to be a Viagra link. I actually, early on when I didn't have a website maintenance and security plan, I had client sites that got hacked because I didn't know anything about security. And it was always a Viagra link. It was like, my client would say, there's somewhat weird like Viagra link in my text. And I'd be like, first of all, I'm super embarrassed. I'm like, well, I did not put that everywhere on there. But it was like every time, like, why is Viagra the king of black hat techniques?
Yeah.
I guess we don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but yeah, it does seem like that's always the case.
Yeah, that's it. I don't know why it's always Viagra sites that are waiting to pounce on that opportunity. Yeah, but that's another really important thing, with SEO. Like you've got to be careful with security, and you've got to be careful with that side of the website. Like, yeah, it's very easy. And that was a big.
When was the big HTTPS algorithm update? Was that? I'm trying to remember when that was. I remember that was a big deal. Like if your site wasn't secure, that you were going to get penalized somehow.
Yeah. So what happened? I think that was. I want to say that was about
17 or 18. Yeah. Like
2017. I want to say it's about 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah. And this is the thing about Google algorithm updates. Like when that algorithm update was released, you still saw some websites ranking without HTTPS, but gradually it was phased out, right? And it takes a bit of time to really implement that. But over time, things like that just get phased out completely. And now you don't really see websites without HTTPS ranking.
It is rare. Yeah, it was funny because one of my close colleagues here locally in Columbus, Ohio, for whatever reason, he was a digital agency. He did not have HTTPS, which I was still shocked about, but he still got incredibly good rankings because he had such a strong SEO foundation on his site. And he had a lot of intentional keyword that were all white hat techniques. So it was kind of interesting. Even after that update, he still ranked really well. So I guess that goes to show you might get penalized, but it may not completely, remove your site from Google. And that actually leads me to another question I wanted to have for you, Julian, which was, what do these penalties look like? Like, will you just slowly go down in the rankings? Does somebody message you, or does Google give you like a warning? Like sometimes with Google Search Console, you'll get a warning if you have a bad link or something. Yeah. Is there anything like that Google does with SEO, or is it more of just you better keep an eye on where your rankings are because you might be slipping?
It's a bit of, it really varies now, honestly. So what used to be very common was manual penalties, right? So Google would have a team that manually reviewed websites, and they could scan through the website and very quickly see, right, this website is Blackhat, it's doing something dodgy, we need to penalize it. And then if you had Google Search Console installed, which is really important, I think you probably agree, right? For any website, you want to have that installed. Then you'd get a message saying that you've received a manual action penalty. Having said that, there's a lot of websites that get penalized nowadays with an algorithmic penalty, and it will just hit their site, and it might be gradual, or it might be like literally overnight, like it wipes their traffic out to zero. It kind of varies. But usually it's quite a harsh incline. It's not like you lose 100 visitors per month or 1,000 visitors per month. It's literally like if you look over even a few months or a few weeks, the traffic is just getting annihilated. Yeah.
Gotcha. And I guess that's the importance of having Google Search Console installed so you can track your keywords, and then also Google Analytics too, right? To be able to actually look at your traffic occasionally and see what's going on if you do have an SEO strategy, or for clients too, particularly for our clients. Is a lot of listeners, web designers don't have the most robust SEO strategy necessarily for their own business, but a lot of my students are doing it for their clients. So this is key. Like, it's a good reminder to your quarterly or monthly or whatever the arrangement is, to look over the analytics and to see where things line up in regards to traffic.
Yeah. I mean, other things too. Like, if I was a web designer and I was in control of clients, like there's loads of upsells that you could use for your clients that would benefit SEO, but are also quick wins that wouldn't take you much time. Like, for example, with Google's algorithm, page speed is really important, because if Google sees people are landing on the page, it takes too long to load and then they bounce straight off, then that page won't rank on Google for long. So page speed is not just important for usability, but also for Google rankings, right? Mm-hmm. But you can easily boost that with a tool like, I installed a Nitro Pack earlier this year, and it took my website speed up like crazy. I mean, those sort of things are like really quick wins you could upsell to a designer. Something you mentioned a little bit ago too was to have a separate blog post for that keyword. That's a biggie too. Yeah. What I feel like that's the quickest win for any web designer or for their clients, is to just have a separate page for their service or keyword or whatever it is, because that ends up being one of the easiest wins and quickest wins for SEO that I've found, at least, is if you just separate those pages instead of having just one page with all your services. Yeah, that's it. Like, if you separate it and silo it out, then it just makes it much easier to rank. And when Google's all about relevance, it wants users to find the information they're looking for really quickly, right? So if they type in best web designer in Ohio, and you have a page that specifically only talks about that topic, it's only optimized for that keyword and nothing else, then that has a much higher chance of ranking versus one single service page but it's talking about web design, it's talking about SEO, it's talking about marketing, and it just goes off on this crazy tangent.
Yeah. Good call. Speaking of that, having a page that is dedicated to one location in particular, I would love to ask you, depending on what updates you've seen with Google this year, when it comes to duplicated content and switching out the location name. For example, like I'm in Columbus, Ohio, but I'm actually right outside of Columbus in Grove City, Ohio. And outside of Columbus, just like most all places, we have a lot of different suburbs and stuff like that. So I've known some colleagues who have got really good SEO rankings by just targeting Grove City or Columbus or the different ones in certain pages. Yeah. The only thing was, though, a lot of the other content was the same. I have heard different things on this. What was funny, though, is I actually saw it work on Google, and I always generally look at what is actually pulling up and what is working. But that seems to be a little more of a black hat technique now, right? If you use the same content, but just switch out the location or city or state. Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, if it was me personally and I was running a website about web design, I would make sure the content is unique on every page. And not just unique in having the location name, but actually, making it unique and personalized in each situation. Having said that, although Google doesn't like duplicate content, you will see instances where you're like, "What? How is that ranking? Like, right. What is going on there?" And some things slip through the net. I know Google's algorithm isn't perfect. It's far from 100%. So there will be instances where what they say or what they recommend doesn't quite match with what is actually happening.
Okay, that makes sense. And there's another example. I don't want to give them extra credit, but there is a site called freshiesites.com, and they seem to take this approach. And I don't know if this is just stateside or in our area. I haven't looked in detail, but I have just seen, if you type in like web design, at least in my neck of the woods, you will see a Freshie Sites page that has pretty much every city, and it seems to be duplicated content. So this is where, like you said, it's like maybe technically that is a black hat technique that Google doesn't like, but maybe that technique is still on the decline as far as how Google can track it or what that would look like. I would say, if I were to put my coaching shoes on for anyone listening, I would agree, Julian. I would say customize the content. Now, if you have the same services that can apply to anywhere, then I would probably still have like a services section. What I would do is probably save it as like a global section. And I use Divi, which you can do this with pretty much any theme now. You can save a section as a global section and have that on different pages. That leads me to another question here. What about that technique? What if it's not actually text that you typed on the page, but it's pulling in from like a theme, like a saved theme section? How does Google read that if it's like a global section that's on numerous pages?
Oh, if it's just like a footer or something like that, that's fine, because it looks natural to Google, and every website has a footer, right? For example, like on all my blogs, I have like certain elements that just stay the same every time. And also it helps. I mean, for example, like there's something called EAT signals. And basically, these are signals that indicate you are actually a real business, and they add credibility to your site. So like in the footer, you might include the actual company address or the phone number. And that's what what an offline brick and mortar business would do, so it looks natural to Google. Yeah.
That's a good point. Good call. I always wondered about that with those global elements. If Google dinged sites, if they were repeated on a bunch of pages, but at the same time, like if I'm going to create like 25 location-based pages in Ohio for web design, what a pain in the ass to have to go through every page and retype all the service. Like I would totally just have a saved section of services and some rotating testimonials, but I would just customize the city specific type of content. Like, if whatever it would look like, or whatever it would just be a few paragraphs for that city or whatever, that's probably what I would customize. So does that sound like a sound strategy if you were to advise me if I were to do that?
I think if it was like only 10% of the content, then it's okay. But if it's like the majority of the page is duplicated, then it might be working today, or you might get away with it today, but I think long term you want to build a strategy where you can make it unique, but you can always like, I mean, you probably already have like copywriters in your business who could just nip in and make a few changes here and there and, you know, make it unique. Yeah.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you were to have a lot of pages, it would probably be something where you could spend a lot of time for a little while, but it doesn't mean you're going to do that every week. Like you could just spend a lot of time optimizing 25 pages and let that, you know, go for a while.
Yeah, that's it. Especially, I mean, like with those service pages, when they rank, the amount of customers it'll bring through is crazy. So it's worth spending a bit of time. Yeah.
It's true. That's what my buddy did with his site, and it totally ended up working. I don't know how much time he spent initially, but it did end up working. He was using probably over 50% of repeating sections or global sections, but I like your little 10% rule. We'll stick with that. Keep it, you know, maybe I'll even nudge it to 25% right now. Just keep, like, I would say that keep over, you know, under a fourth of your page, any sort of standard template, but keep the rest of it custom. That's probably what I'd go with.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I mean, the other good thing is as well that it's like an asset, right? So it's like a piece of real estate, and every single page that ranks can potentially bring in more customers, more leads, more traffic from Google. So
that's it there.
Definitely worth doing. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. And I know as an SEO guy, I'm sure you've seen it. This is tricky for a lot of clients because they want instant results, but it does take some time. And some posts will rank quicker than others, depending on the competition, the keyword. Something we have talked about quite a bit on the podcast is the different types of key phrases, as in like short tail and long tail, which is a whole different topic. But that definitely all comes back to this idea of good backlinks. And then especially when algorithm changes happen, I feel like as long as you have those best practices in place, you're going to be okay for the most part. Like, yeah, you might have some stuff you need to tweak and work on optimization. I'm still working on optimization myself, but overall, my site has ranked really well over the past few years with a very, very elementary understanding of SEO. So I hope that's of some encouragement to everybody.
Yeah, that's it. I don't think you don't need to be an expert to rank. Like, I think if you're doing the right things, like you obviously are, you know, if you're creating great content, people are going to link to it naturally, for example.
And the podcast is a good example of just complete organic SEO. I don't promote my podcast at all. I've never run an ad for it. I don't do any, like, it's just 100% organic. So yeah, it goes to show you that, you know, it's definitely working somehow, some way. It's working. So, and it's just really simple. We don't do keywords. Like, I don't try to optimize. I use SEO Yoast as my main SEO plugin.
Oh, yeah.
I don't try to optimize that for every podcast that goes out. We don't even often do keywords. We just do the title, do a good description, outline, good relevant human reading content with a transcription and links. And that's it. There it is. There's the magic of CSS.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. I mean, you can turn it around pretty quickly. I was speaking to someone else about this recently, like the other week, and we were saying, you know, you can rank a podcast like so quickly. It's crazy.
Actually what's really funny. One of my students, her client reached out and said, "Hey, I saw you on the Josh Hall Web Design Show," because she was on the show recently. Shout out to Shannon if she's listening. And she was like, "How did my client find me?" And I asked her that, and I think maybe it's possible that he had Googled her if he was looking at other web designers or something, and then there her interview was on the show. So that's a perfect example. And I think it's because I use the video version of the show, the YouTube version, that definitely helps. And I have that embedded on the podcast page. So as you mentioned earlier, it might depend on what's in the post. Are there images? Are there videos? And that definitely helps. I think a lot of people need to remember Google and YouTube are hand in hand when it comes to searchability.
Yeah. That's the other thing with YouTube. Like, you can rank crazy quickly, like almost within minutes of publishing a video. If it's targeting a low competition keyword that doesn't really have much competition, it's easy to rank for. Like, they can just rank incredibly fast.
Yeah, something that I've seen work really well for me, and then I've really talked to a lot of my students about doing for their local business clients, are snippets. The power of snippets, whether it's a video or just a section of a blog post. And for anyone who doesn't know, snippet is basically, and I'd be open to hear your interpretation on a snippet, but basically when you type something in Google and it gives you like a snapshot of an article or a video, that's a snippet. It's like a featured snippet of a blog post or video. And that is a huge game-changing SEO feature. Do you know when that was released or about when that came about, the snippet?
I want to say
Google
like
snippet stuff.
I want to say like two years ago, it really became like a big thing. But it might have.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
That sounds about right, because I started doing tutorials for Divi specifically at the end of 2017, and I never remember seeing snippets up until probably like 2019 or 2020. It seems like they really started picking up.
Yeah. Now, I mean, almost every search where you're looking for information there's a snippet, right?
Yeah.
Or some sort of, or like the people also ask section as well, where you can click on the people also ask question, and then it will drop down with more information there too.
That is a good one. I should say too, there was a couple links I mentioned earlier. For people who are new to SEO, I did do a basics of SEO podcast episode, which was episode 54. So definitely worthwhile going back to that. And then one of my close SEO colleagues, Michelle, we did an episode 107 about how to do keyword research for free, which is really interesting because she backed up a lot of the points you're talking about, Julian, with just common sense searches, like type in Google what term you might type in, and then boom, there you're going to give a lot of different results that what people also ask. Something she taught me that I thought was fascinating was if you click on a term and then you go back to the page you're on previously, what people ask will change. So it'll give you even more options, which I was fascinated by. Like I didn't even think about that.
It's like infinite as well. You can just keep clicking all day, you know? Right.
Yeah. It's like, it can be dangerous, right? Because next thing you know, like you definitely, I think if you do any sort of keyword research or content work, you have to give yourself a deadline of time. Otherwise, you could spend 8 hours just going back and just going through the spider webs of Google to see what those terms are pulling up. So
sadly, I find that quite fun.
Hey, that's good. Well, for you,
is fun. Yeah.
And I love that there's folks like you who love it. I personally don't like it very much. I get to the surface level and I'm ready to move on. But for somebody who enjoys that, I think it's awesome. And I think that's why you are really important. And a lot of others who are doing keyword research and SEO optimization and content are really important, because there's a tactfulness that you need to balance, I've seen, with good human content. But as you mentioned earlier, you do have to have the keyword in there at some point. You don't want to stuff it, but you don't want to have not enough of it. And then there's really a fine line between pleasing the robots, but then also pleasing the people who are actually going to read the article. So I think a lot of the things you've hit on so far in regards to these updates, I mean, I guess at the core, that's really what we're getting to, isn't it? Like all these updates are trying to help people get answers to their questions. Is that maybe a fair definition of these algorithm updates?
That's exactly it. Yeah. Just better information, better results on Google. Yeah.
Yeah. Well said, man. Well, hey, I have one final question for you here, Julian. This has been a really interesting talk. And every time I talk to an SEO person, I feel reaffirmed in the simplicity of an SEO strategy and how powerful that can be. Where would you like my audience to go though, man? I know you've got some awesome resources. Is there a certain resource, or you just want people to go to your website? Where would you like everyone to go after listening to this to find more about you?
So if you want to find out more, you can check out my website, juliangoldie.com. We have a free book on SEO that you can download instantly there. And it's free. It's pretty much got everything you need to know about SEO, and it's not too in-depth either. If you're just a beginner, it will help you a lot. I also publish YouTube videos and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Awesome. And I know that's all, shocker, linked from your website. So we'll have your website there, and your free book, Link Building Mastery, is available. So I'm looking forward to checking that out. I should have checked that out before this show, but I think you actually just booked last week, so I didn't get too much time to check out your site before doing this. But man, this has been really cool. I'd be curious, Julian, let's rephrase this question. What do you think the big algorithm updates will be in 2022? Just off of what you've seen over the past year or so, if you had to guess, what do you think Google is going to focus on and change in 2022?
So I think number one, there will be definitely more core updates where they change the parameters, across the whole site and how they grade those. I would also say, I would expect next year that with Google, there's going to be even less space for organic listings, because Google is a business. They make money from their ads, right? And the paid listings on Google, which means less and less space for the organic listings. So I can see, ads being pushed more on Google's interface and less space for organic listings. I could also see more YouTube videos being pushed, more and more searches now. When you go on Google, it comes up with a YouTube video or a tutorial based on that question. I can see that happening more and more. Yeah.
That makes sense. It does seem like all the platforms are going to video.
Yeah, that's it. And also I think Core Web it's not something, it's a whole nother rabbit hole, but Core Web Vitals are something else that will become more and more important for websites. And that's more about the build and the technical side of the website.
Right. Right. Yeah. And that's the importance of having a well-designed and built website. A lot of clients of mine in the past were so focused on SEO, but their websites were so bad. And I tried to tell them, you don't want to invest in a bunch of digital marketing SEO if your website's terrible, because where is your traffic going to go? It's going to go to your terrible website that's going to turn them away or bounce them. So
that's the problem. It's with SEO, it goes hand in hand with web design and CRO as well. Like if your website is designed nicely, especially if you're getting a lot of traffic from SEO, you need to convert it, right? There's no point getting 1 million people from Google if you can't turn that traffic into leads or sales. So
yeah, what's CRO?
Hand in hand. Conversion rate optimization. So optimizing your website to make sure you convert as many people on the page as possible, and that might be into product sales, it might be into leads, it might be into clicking an affiliate link. Yeah.
See, this is one reason I love talking with folks is I learn something new every podcast. I did not know there was a term for conversion design, which is conversion. What was it? Conversion rate optimization?
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. I've got it in the old memory banks. Now I'm totally going to use that because that's genius. I've had trouble explaining conversion-based design, but CRO makes a lot of sense because it's measurable, right? You can totally measure that with Google Analytics and tracking codes now and all kinds of stuff.
Opt-in rates. Yeah.
Opt-in rates. It. Yeah. Awesome, dude. Well, Julian, I really had a blast chatting with you, man. I love your approach on SEO, and I feel honestly, I feel better. I feel better about SEO. I thought maybe by the end of this conversation, I'd be worried about the changes that Google's going to do and what you've seen, but I actually feel personally more confident and at ease than ever. Because I think we really got to the core of what these updates are for, which is for all of us, better online experiences. So, yeah.
So I mean, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by SEO, but if you go back to the basics, it's still simple. Hard to execute, simple to understand.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I like that. Well said. Well, man, that's a great place to end this. I'll make sure we link your website, juliangoldie.com. Everyone can pick up your free link building mastery book. Man, thanks so much for your time. Thank you for staying up late.
Thanks.
Really, really appreciate that. You're obviously, you're not from Thailand. Where are you from? Where are you originally from?
I'm from England, Manchester originally.
Manchester. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, and I was wanting to know exactly where, because I talk with so many Brits now. I'm starting to get a feel for the different accents. I can tell like a Liverpool accent from a London accent from a, wherever. Manchester's a little bit different. So I'm kind of getting a feel for all the different accents. And then when it bleeds in up to Northern Britain, and then you get to the Ireland's and everything, then it all kind of bleeds in together. So I find it
gets harder to understand as well. Different parts of the country, The crazy thing with UK is like you can travel 20, 30 minutes down the road and the accent is totally different. Like Liverpool, Manchester, they're 40 minutes away. Accent is night and day.
That is the truth from what I've heard. And we see it a little bit in the States, although it's more like 2 or 3 hours. You'll tell a big difference. Mm-hmm. But I've got family outside of New Jersey and it's like straight up Jersey accent. And in Ohio, we're kind of mid-range, a little bit of Southern, a little bit of twang, but not near that you'd find if you go down south and it's, straight up country sounding. Yeah. So I find that fascinating, man.
It's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Awesome.
thanks very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, dude. Really, really enjoyed our chat. I'm really excited to see how this helps some folks out. Thanks for your time, Julian.
Thanks. Yeah.
All right, man. Cheers.
Hey guys and gals, just wanted to pop in with a couple things before you head out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. I would love to hear your feedback, and it will also help other web designers find the show. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode. Just go to joshhall.co, click on podcasts, and search this episode number, and you'll find all the links, descriptions, and resources we talked about. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, and you'll be notified when the next episode is live. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode.